week. Hi, Mike. So I just want to answer Gibbs' question from the previous panel about what is premium, because I've thought a lot about this one. So it's an in the eye of the beholder thing, right? So if you're a seller, it's that you could charge more for something. If you're an advertiser, it's because it's the audience you want to reach and the environment you want to reach them in. If you're a consumer, it's some media content you have to pay for or that someone gives you as a reward for something. If you're a trade reporter, it's a story or it's the next question on your panel. So that's what premium is if you wanted to know that. Okay, so we're just waiting for Ilana Nolte from M6 who's in traffic, but I think she'll be here any minute. So Ilana? No? Okay. She'll be here any minute and we'll take the stage. And I'll move over here and do the introduction now. Okay, also I think I'm officially the only guy with a tie on in the room. Is there anybody? Okay, two, all right. Because in the year 2023, ties will be back, okay, get the memo. All right, so as I explained earlier when I set this up, this is a little different. We try and take a crystal ball look at how different things could be 5 years from now. I mean, the amazing thing about this industry is the more things change, the more they remain the same. I mean, and we'll get a little bit into some of that in this conversation, but you know, I just am struck that the Upfront not only continues to exist in the form that I started covering it 35 years ago, but that it's just grown and there's so many more players and that the digital guys want to be in the club too and that they retrofit into the same rules and protocols and negotiating styles and tactics. So it's just been a progression. But now we're going to switch from 2018 into 2023. So I'd like to ask my panel to all introduce themselves and describe what their role and function is in the year 2023. And it's okay if you're retired, and because I hope to be. And also describe what was the greatest thing you predicted 5 years ago about the market today, or that you didn't guess right. And we'll start with Tom because he's head of innovation, and by the way, has a new book coming out called Digital Darwinism, so you can get where he's coming from.
Thanks for having me. I'm Tom Goodwin, head of innovation for Zenith. So, I mean, my role is about change. There's a lot of change in the world. It's my role to guide clients through this process. So there's no reason to think that my job would be particularly different in the year 2023. In fact, when you look at this industry, and I presume when we're talking about this industry, we mean TV, very little has changed in the last 5 years. So it'd be easy to assume that I'll be having the same sorts of conversations 5 years ahead from now. The thing that I predicted that was right, probably that slowly all media will become digital. I think by 2025, probably 99% of all media dollars spent will be on digital media. It'll just take different forms.
I'm Mike Law. I oversee investment at Dentsu Aegis Network. I looked back. I have a tie in my bag, by the way, for the record. I wanted to wear one, but I was told that wouldn't be hip enough for an innovative panel. So I actually looked back yesterday at our 2012-13 pre-Upfront deck to see how much different it looked versus the deck that we've been out talking to clients about today. First off, we've obviously hired a new designer because it looks a little bit better, so our PowerPoint's gotten a lot better. But the first probably 20 pages of it were huts and putts and ratings and the top 10 shows in prime time. I think that makes up half a page in today's presentation, and the very last page of the deck was about digital video and the rise of digital video and a kind of our take on how we needed to be more holistic. So at least we were on the right path. So I guess I haven't made any bold predictions, but at least we were going in the right direction.
I'm Barry Lowenthal. I run the Media Kitchen. Tell me again all the questions that you want me to ask.
So what is your job in 2023, and what was the greatest prediction you either made or failed to guess 5 years ago?
Okay, so I am going to still be at the Media Kitchen. I like working at the Media Kitchen. I think I want to continue to work at the Media Kitchen even in the next 5 years, although I will be spending a lot more time in Palm Beach. Let's see. So I have been saying that we have a real problem with social media. And it's not because of all of the Cambridge Analytica stuff that's going on. I think all that will sort of figure itself out. I think that there's a real fundamental problem with this channel because more people feel worse about themselves after spending time on social media than before. And I think that that is a fundamental problem with this channel that is going to have gigantic social consequences, societal consequences. In fact, I think you're going to see a rise in mental health professionals like you've never seen before. So I think that Facebook will be far less dominant than it is today, and I think social media will be far less dominant than it is today, which I know is really hard for us to imagine given the recent earnings that you've seen coming out of Facebook. I mean, in fact, Facebook's earnings this last quarter are more than I think CBS's market cap or something like that. I mean, it's staggering. But I think in 5 years you will see a world that is less dominated by social media and less dominated by Facebook.
Okay. Mike, let me clarify the question about the network television or video marketplace.
Oh, you mean I had to talk about network television or? Well, I mean, Facebook is video, right? So it's all video. All
absolutely.
Right.
That's where I was going. Okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Piner. I'm SVP of Video and Data-Driven Investments for MediaHub. And this is actually my third week at MediaHub, so I'd like to tell you what my role is, but I don't really know yet. My role at MediaHub is they're a Boston-based agency, but we have a New York office, and my role is going to be to grow a video investment team in the New York office, which is really exciting. Get to hire, hopefully, lots of young, new, fresh-thinking people and train them to throw out the old models and think about this in a whole new way, video holistically. So I'm excited about that. It's going to be a lot of work, certainly, but we'll see how it goes. And we can talk about that maybe next year. And my other role is to lead them in data-driven investments, particularly in advanced TV. And this is, moving very fast. There's lots of different players in the space. I've learned a lot about it in my role at Magna over the past year. And so I think if we can push forward in this space, I think it's really important to grow in this area. As far as what we got right and what we got wrong, I think certainly I could point out a lot more things that got wrong. But one thing I think that we got right 5 years ago, and maybe we should have acted on it sooner, was the brand safety concerns that emerged in YouTube recently. I think everyone saw that coming in the industry, and I don't think moved fast enough to quell it, and I think we're seeing some of that today.
Okay. Well, we'll let Alana introduce herself when she comes, but I thought it was interesting that none of you predicted you would be with another agency or company. So she's with WPP's Group M's latest agency, M6. I'm going to predict that it'll be part of Accenture in 5 years, but anyway. She's not here, so I can say that. So earlier in that last panel 5 years ago, there was a reminder about the 5% solution that got cable on base. Well, I think it's interesting. This week, Nielsen reported its May universe estimates. Well, 5 years ago, it reported them. And it found that there was erosion of 3% in cable subscribers. So it seems to be accelerating. 5 years ago, there was a real acceleration of the erosion of cable subscriptions, and I'm wondering if you saw that as a tipping point, and whether we're moving into a period where this concept of traditional linear television kind of really doesn't mean much, given the progression of over the top and the accelerated erosion of traditional subscription television.
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty shocking. I mean, the numbers in the headlines of, cord cutting and the loss of traditional cable providers. But I think what's not being talked about enough is obviously the virtual MVPDs, can't even say that are emerging in all these other new streaming sources and sort of the growth in those. And this is in a very much a test and learn phase right now. So I think if we look at the numbers and you look underneath those headlines, those big shocking headlines, which paint a very dire picture, you also see growth in over-the-top and connected TV and some of these subscription services, DirecTV Now being one of them in first quarter, with the partnerships they're doing and whatever. So I think we've only scratched the surface of what's possible in this new this new environment. And I think what we need to, if we step back from this for a second, I think what we're witnessing is sort of the evolution of television itself and what's going on. It's hard to predict the growth of that on that side and how it's going to catch on as people experience these new environments of toggling back and forth in one app between live TV and cloud DVR and on demand, all in one place. And so, you know, who knows? I think the possibility is also very, very positive as well. So,
there have been so many amazing stats that have come out, you know, this year alone. Starting with, you know, more money in digital than TV, TV sales down, the cord cutting that you talked about. More people are watching, more young people are watching TV through a streaming device than ever before. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on. I mean, so I think we are going to look back at this year as sort of a giant tipping point. You know, the thing that, for the last few years on these panels, you know, we keep talking about pushing water uphill, and we keep talking about, you know, trying to fix this linear TV marketplace and get better measurement and all this stuff. And I mean, who cares about all that crap anymore? Like, just let it go is kind of how I think we need to think about this. Let's stop focusing on exposure and start focusing on outcomes. You know, that is the way to move this industry forward. You know, if your client does not have a business model that allows for an optimizable conversion event, help them change it. I mean, look at what's happening with all of the DTC brands that were featured in the IAB, those 400 brands. All of them have an optimizable convertible event that do not rely on anything like exposure to drive business. That's the world that we're moving into.
Time's up.
It's been great.
I think it's a natural progression, and I like what I think it was Gibbs on the previous panel said about life stages, and that, you know, people will move through, and that OTT in a way is great for television, and it's bringing and giving young consumers exposure to television. So I think it really benefits especially some of the bigger cable networks. I think for long tail cable networks, you got to figure out what's the distribution strategy. We're hearing so much from the partners about, you know, creating their own distribution, their own OTT platforms. I think that's going to be very difficult to scale. All of a sudden, as a household, if you're saying, I need to buy 12 different subscriptions to get exactly the content that I want. So I think there's still a lot of value in traditional cable. The migration is happening, but it's not, I don't think that 5 years we're going to say, can you believe what happened in 2018? And it fell off a cliff. So I do think you'll continue to see that because audiences are able to curate their own content. They're able to kind of create their own experience based on what's best for their needs at any given time. And a year later, that could be different. 5 years later, that could be different. So at some point in time, cable will be the best option for you. And at another point, maybe Hulu TV will be the best option for you. So I just think it's about, you know, how consumers are creating whatever experience they need at that point in their life.
I think I've got two sort of contrary opinions in my own head, which is quite odd. If you want to understand the future, the best thing to do is either look at like an 8-year-old kid and how they interact with tablets and stuff, or look at like a 14-year-old girl in like a second-tier city in China. Not too closely, because you'll get arrested. But that's how the future's going to be. Like, it's that behavior. If you try and explain like today's paradigm of TV to those people right now, none of the words that we use make any sense. Like the word video, TV, OLV, OTT, cable, satellite, none of that stuff means anything to these people. As an industry, we're obsessed with the pipe that supplies people with stuff that they love. And that makes no sense at all today, and it will certainly make less sense in the future. So you look at that and you predict that at some point in the future, everything's going to be digital, it's all just going to be video, and all of the terminology that we use today will be nonsense, apart from live versus on demand. That will be the big bifurcation. But then you look at reality, and you look at the way that the TV industry has gone, and in reality, when it comes to profound changes, it's not changed at all in the last 5 years. The US marketplace is probably the least innovative TV marketplace in the entire world. Because there's no national TV provider who has a mandate to provide content for people in the best way. So there's going to be this big sort of force between consumers that look at the environment and think, this is crazy, this is not serving my needs, and an entire TV industry that's happy with not really making any change at all. So it's quite easy to predict that in 5 years' time, probably things won't be that different, but there probably will be a tipping point when all of a sudden the whole industry kind of gives way and suddenly allows everything to be supplied as video rather than TV. But making a prediction on when that's going to happen is impossible, because I've made that prediction about 5 times and I've been wrong each time.
Well, I heard some diverse responses here, but I heard a little bit of a common theme about a shift towards outcomes or attribution. We heard earlier in the panel, A&E is even open-minded about going to attribution models for television. But in a way, we've always had direct response television, and brands have always measured their outcomes through regression models or marketing mix models. What is going to change in the market structure 5 years from now? Will we literally give up impressions ratings as a point of negotiation and do it based on A&E's new model for attribution-based results? Something like that?
I mean, I can imagine a time where we don't even buy based on, we don't buy based on impressions. Every single campaign has to establish their own sort of benchmark. So every campaign, you put a test into market, given the automated ways of buying media, I mean, maybe you could read out that test in a matter of days. And then from then, you know exactly where you need to be allocating your media, and you know exactly what you should be paying for it. Which means that things like GRPs and so on and so forth, it just doesn't matter.
I would just say I think that there's a bit, in theory, that's a great idea, and business outcomes is something that we all talk about. And I kind of always try to use the example: nobody would sit on a panel and say that's a bad idea. Like, at the end of the day, yes, we're trying to drive sales, we're trying to drive business outcomes for our clients, but there is a massive disconnect in our industry when you step off this panel and you have to go talk to clients, and you have to, the commoditization of media and GRPs and impressions, and the fact that we're, and oftentimes as an agency and even as vendor partners, we're measured on a legacy model. And it was up on the screen before, there's so many pitches going on and everything, and we have these great strategic presentations, and then it's, well, how cheap can you buy it? So we need to bridge that disconnect, and I think we need to do it sooner rather than later if we can get to that point where we can effectively measure business outcomes. The other problem is probably that not everybody measures them the same. So the fact we have a common currency, something to grade everybody off of in an equal way, does benefit the industry. So that's the disconnect, and I think that we need to figure out a way to solve for that and get clients to lean into doing that, even if they're kind of blazing the trail on their own.
I'm going to sound like some sort of naive hippie here, but we have this like obsession with performance and attribution modeling, and the reality is that we buy things based on billions of different things that happen. It would be a bit like listening to a song and being like, yes, the best note was the third middle C. I'm going to give all of the credit to that C. Right. And therefore, I kind of worry that we're in this world where we kind of optimize to metrics which are more about capturing success and showing that you were responsible for success, actually, rather than creating success more holistically. So it's inevitable that we're going to go down this path, because all digital media companies want to be TV companies, and all TV companies want to be digital media companies. So they keep on repeating the same sort of stupid things that the other people do in the hope of kind of being the same.
I'm really struck by Mike's observation there. I do think it shocked me how much things have stayed the same, and how people have retrofitted into an old simplistic model of GRPs and impressions. And my own observation is it's because as complexity increases, as there's more and more options, people regress to a very simple way of doing business. But during our preparation for this panel,
it's because we like measuring things on spreadsheets. So we have we have this need to make sure that there are numbers rather than feelings. And when we talk about CPMs and we compare CPMs, we actually forget what an M is. Because sometimes an M is a Friday night with your mates in the cinema watching something for 60 seconds long, and sometimes it's something that you don't see below the fold that doesn't have any sound. So we have this need to try and judge everything mathematically, and that's what's driving this.
I love that whole, that what you just said about we're not buying feelings, we're buying GRPs, not feelings, or something like that you said, right?
It was something good, I know that.
It was very good. It was a good, guys, you should tweet that. It was a good one.
Everyone's tweeting.
And I think probably the closest thing that we're getting to that in form of a currency is attention. I mean, because arguably, right, I mean, if you're paying more attention to it, there is an emotional component to attention that maybe you don't see in something like an impression or a GRP.
All right, so let's go there. There's been a lot of attention to attention. We've had Fox and Joe Marchese really push for, and we talked about a little bit earlier in terms of a more engaged user experience, paying more for less sometimes, 6-second units. By the way, who predicted that by the year 2023, 3 seconds would be the standard unit of sale? Okay. But is that really what we should be going to? Some kind of engagement metric, not an impression metric, and how do we possibly come up with a standard for that?
Probably not engagement, but probably attention. Like, I don't think I've ever engaged with a single ad in my entire life, but I've bought lots of stuff because of ads. So this idea that unless you click on something, it's a waste of time, I think is very dangerous. But yeah, I think the notion of attention and the degree to which something imparted a message is definitely the way forward. How you do it is virtually impossible. But
I don't know if it's all about attention. I think it's about effectiveness at the end of the day, and that being a factor in how we measure things or the success of things. I think that's what's important, and how we do that can vary. Like you said, Joe, we've been doing that for years in DR, in a way, right? So it's been done for a long time, but I think that needs to be in this new world factored in, because the conversation is evolving. We're moving from a place where we're trying to simply count impressions across screen, right? And that's a problem, because not every impression is created equal. It's like bananas and apples, right? So I like bananas instead of oranges. But anyway, so then we've moved to like this duration conversation. And so, what's the value, because viewers are tuned in longer in television than in digital, right? So duration has to be a factor, right? And now we're moving into placement, right? So, okay, I'm going to pay more for a 6-second ad. It's not going to be exactly, on an exact ratio based on the 30-second cost, but the placement of it, right? And it's also going to be isolated. It's going to be on its own, right? So, I mean, that all gets to effectiveness, and do those ads break through? And the model is completely changing for the first time. So I like to say it's human nature that, we don't call an ambulance until the patient is almost dead. Well, I think the patient is almost dead, so we're calling the ambulance, and basically, and it's a pretty dark analogy, but anyway, so I think that, we're kind of throwing out this standard ad model, or on the verge of it, which is a good thing, because it's been the same standard ad model for 50 years. And the number of ad breaks we've had, right, and the commercial lengths that we've had, and we've just stuffed them in. So I think, viewers, finally we put them in control, and they're sending us a message that, this is, unwatchable at a point, and we need to do something about it. So I think that's happening, and how we evaluate that is going to get quite complicated. It's not going to be as easy. This standard format has also enabled us to trade billions of dollars every year in a month on spreadsheets, because it was very easy to understand. Everybody understands the rules. They understand how to operate in it, how to evaluate it, and this is becoming more and more complicated. So, I think that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Okay, by the way, my favorite fruit is Monsanto's new banana and oranges. Anyway, so, again, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. It is always about the outcome, or the effectiveness, or the metric, or the KPI, which is what you guys plan for going in, but you have to negotiate around a unit of exchange, and then you can post on that out, which is why I thought A&E being willing to embrace attribution is kind of an interesting idea for a media seller. But, so let me switch over a little bit. I think despite all of the consistency that it's existed, the role of the GRP and the CPM, I do think that this year could be an inflection point. By this year, I mean 2018. Because there is a lot going on. Some of the payoff of things that have been going on with 3MS over the last few years in the MRC. By the way, MediaPost launched a new publication called Research Intelligence, which is our first premium, literally you got to pay for it, subscription model. And we have a great interview coming out over the next couple of days with George Ivey, who will get into this, and we're going to break some big news. But by the end of this year, there will be a new standard for media measurement that will be duration weighted. It will be able to look at, and you'll even be able to do reach and frequency planning against it. When it will be adopted in the marketplace, I can't say, but at least the standard will exist. And so my question for all of you is, will we keep defaulting back to the ease of use of a known GRP archaic impression, or will we really try and look at the role that each platform or media experience provides? Will the currency shift to what is the audience impact?
Can we just welcome Alana?
Yeah, so Alana, let me do the introductory question, which is I set up for the panel, which is if you could introduce yourself and explain what your role is in your organization in the year 2023, and what was your greatest prediction that you made 5 years ago that either came to be or was wrong?
Hi, I'm really sorry I'm late, guys. I'm Alana. I manage M6 in the US, and we, over the past 3 years, have seen extraordinary growth, and we're anticipating to see that even further by 2023. I think one of the things that we've been working through now and will continue to be progressing in the next 5 years is changing the way in which we are looking at our consumers' experience with ads. I think we all, as marketers, need to come to reality that it is a new day and age in which consumers are looking, they need to be choosing their ad experience. So the way in which we do that needs to be more relevant, more quality. And I think the way that we approach our audience planning and our buying and negotiation and content creation is very different. And the way that we're doing that today is changing, and it's going to be even further progressed by 2023.
I'm also relieved to know in the year 2023, they won't be all male panels, so that's
no,
good.
It'll be all female sitting here, and they won't be late. One of the predictions that I had made even 3 years ago, which we're still hoping will progress more quickly, is programmatic and adjustable TV. So, I mean, I think this year we're already seeing us hitting about 70 million households, about 180 million addressable viewers. And 3 years ago, I was actually reading an article that I think I wrote with you or for MediaPost that was saying that it would become even further progressed and we would be able to be targeting audiences in a very different fashion than linear TV and traditional TV today. And we've had some challenges there. I think the way in which the infrastructure and the architecture of data and technology hasn't changed as much as we would have liked. So data automation and matching back to impressions is not quite there at scale yet. And then the inventory pools and the supply isn't there as well. So we're definitely moving towards the right direction, and there have definitely been some changes in that regard, but would have liked to see it further than where we are today, and hopefully by 2023, we'll have more of an opportunity to be buying cross audiences universally, or for audiences universally cross platforms and devices, which we can't do as readily in the TV space today.
Do you guys agree with that? We're going to see more of an embrace of targeted addressable TV, a shift away from mass reach television over the next 5 years.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the most exciting area, and I think we see that growth now. And I think, the struggle here is when we look at these things and we evaluate them, it's very easy to poke holes in it until it's like, it's not perfect, right? So it's not going to be perfect. It needs to evolve. But, I mean, I think, anything, better than the way we're doing it today is an improvement, right? And so if we wait for that, we're never going to get there. So, and I think it is improving, and it's improving pretty fast. I mean, you really need to stay on top of this stuff on not like a monthly basis, like almost a weekly basis, of some of the partnerships that are being forged, some of the measurement capabilities that are out there, the attribution capabilities. And that in conjunction with just the evolution of television itself, and television moving from analog to digitally delivered or IP delivered television, which is going to unleash more capabilities in the space. So I think now is the time, and we encourage all our advertisers to embrace this, to test it, to learn from it, and to keep going.
And challenge the networks.
And challenge networks as well. Thank you.
So what is different from now versus the late 70s with Cube, or the early 80s with Full Service Network, or AmeriWest, or any other interactive addressable TV initiatives? Why are we still in the testing phase, and why aren't we doing something like cable had with the 5% solution from Ted Bates, where...
I think because people like it how it is. I mean, it's weird because this is another panel where we're supposed to be talking about the future, and actually we talk about the past and today all the time. But the reality is that my understanding of the situation is that most people are relatively happy with the slow change that's going on right now. The moment that you start moving towards a model which is addressable, there's a concern that the boundaries between digitally served video, which is too cheap, and cable TV, which is premium and expensive, that boundary sort of disappears. So people are worried that the moment it becomes addressable, it gets conflated in this world of CPMs where it becomes quite deflationary. So I think for quite sensible commercial reasons, the entire traditional American TV market doesn't really want to change that much. And until they realize that there is another paradigm where all TV is served digitally, where personal data is used to make ads which are much more relevant, which are much more successful, that can be interactive, that can be served in real time, that can be personalized. Until people realize that that's actually going to be a good thing for everyone, we're not going to get into that environment.
Okay, so there's more supply than ever before. There are more hours of original television or video programming than human beings can watch. There are more channels. There's upfronts all over town today. But the one thing that's constant is human attention. It doesn't really, the supply of human attention cannot really expand that much, at least until we evolve into another species or augment our brains with technology. But for the most part, there's limited opportunity. So 2 months ago, Rishad Tobaccowala, or colleague of Tom's, made a prediction that in the next 5 years, so it's in keeping with our time frame, 30% of advertising attention impressions will disappear, mainly from consumers either moving to non-ad supported media like over-the-top subscription TV, or just bypassing advertising altogether using ad blockers or other technology. It's an aggressive projection. There's also an interview with Rishad in Research Intelligentsia coming out where he breaks down the math behind it. It was actually simple math. It's all based on compounding. So it's a legit projection. Whether it will happen, we don't know. But here's my question for you. If the supply of purchasable impressions depletes by 30%, what does that do if demand remains constant or grows, because brands aren't disappearing, more brands are coming on stream all the time? Will we see prices for things like premium inventory, network TV, things like that go up proportionately over time in the next 5 years?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
You know, so originally I would jump on that and I would say yes, but so I was looking at this great chart that showed the average age, and typically when you think about premium content on TV, you think about the award shows, and those ratings continue to go down, and you think about sports. And I saw this great chart about the average age of all the sports teams on TV. And I think only soccer had an average age of people in their 40s, and that was 49.
The audience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, like the channel the premium stuff on television is just getting really old. So I don't know how much more we're going to want to be paying for that. So I think what you're going to see is less premium pricing on television and an expansion of out-of-home. I think that's where you're probably going to see a lot more inflation or price inflation around giant spectaculars, because that's going to be the way to drive conversation publicly and reach. Interesting one, right?
No, it is.
You like that?
I'd like to follow up, but let's get some comments.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to say no, because part of my job is to keep prices down.
there's no clients here, though, so maybe there is.
Right. Well, to you network folks out there. But anyway, yeah, I was at that panel, actually, and Mr. Tobaccowala is a brilliant guy, and obviously that's a headline grabber and whatever, and he paints a pretty dire picture. But I'm a more optimistic person.
Why is that dire picture?
Well, that, you know, that the decline in supply is going to decrease so much.
But you said it
that
was going to
much.
be revenue neutral, if not inflationary.
Well, I think that that's where I'm going, is he said a lot more than just that the supply is going to decline by 30%. What he was talking about when he went further is like a value exchange with consumers, right? And that's what's going on, is that, you know,
That doesn't sound dire.
No, that actually doesn't sound dire. That's what I'm pointing out, is that when you go more into what he said, I think that headline is dire, though, certainly, a 30% decline in supply. I mean, we could debate it after if you want, but I think that's pretty dire. When you talk about, you know, a 30% decline in supply and prices going up, to me and my job, that's pretty dire. So anyway, I think what he was talking about is a value exchange, and that's where I was going earlier, is this value exchange that we have to monetize between consumers. And can we start to break through and get them to opt into advertising? Can we make advertising more effective? Can we come up with different ad models? And I think we have all of these new, it's hard to foresee the potential ad opportunities that are going to be out there beyond just video. I mean, we have voice, we have audio, I mean, we have AR, we have VR, and we have the connected home. I mean, we have a lot of things that are coming into play. And yes, he had a mathematical model to predict this, but I didn't dig into the mathematical model. We could do that after this as well if you'd like. But, you know, I'm sure it was largely based on the historical model that we're dealing with today. And I think a lot of those things are going to get blown.
Yeah, it's about 3 to 5% erosion per year. If you compound it, it gets you to 30%.
But I think you need to, I'm with you, but I think you need to look at the full ecosystem, right? Because digital subscriptions are actually going up. Cord cutters, I think, have increased 33% since 2016. So there are a few things that are changing, right? It's the way in which people are consuming their favorite TV shows, and whether that's through TV versus digital subscriptions or skinny bundles or apps. And then there's also the, the models. So to your point, I don't think anyone's really figured out what the right model is from a revenue-based perspective. So the content creators and the distributors are, we are sitting with their fate right now in terms of them figuring out what the right model is, and inventory and pricing is going to probably come through that. So, whether it's a, just free subscription supported by ads, or whether it's a hybrid, or whether it's fully paid with no ads, I think we're still pretty immature in terms of solving for what the perfect model is.
But here's the problem. It's not just the proliferation of media options, it's the fragmentation of attention. So in 1975, one of your precursor agencies, J. Walter Thompson, did a study estimating there were 500 brand impressions per day per American. Today, I think Nielsen estimates it's about 8,000 or 9,000 a day, because all of those new channels of distribution, all that new program content is distributing many, many more ad impressions. The relative value of an engaged or attention impression is going up. So I think that's why you're seeing players like Fox and others trying to figure out, can we do less is more? Charge more for a truly engaged impression. So what I'm really trying to get at in this discussion, whether it's Rishad's 30% projection or is try and understand what's going to happen to the economics of the business. I mean, it seems pretty obvious to me that you're going to be paying a hell of a lot more for something that's working a hell of a lot better, because buying impressions doesn't mean anything anymore.
Who do you mean by you as a consumer?
An advertiser or an agency. I'm talking about reaching the consumer, acquiring attention.
Well, the worst thing that ever happened to advertising was the internet, because quality content providers were forced into putting their stuff, which was amazing, on the internet. And the media cost was very low to start with. As someone that was working in a creative agency, the amount of time that you spent making the ad was proportional to the production budget, and the production budget was proportional to the media spend. So if someone created a campaign that was going to cost $50,000 in media, your production budget was about $4,000, which means that you made absolute crap. So all digital ads to start with were absolute crap. Because they were absolute crap, they performed very badly. Because they performed very badly, they weren't very good, so you couldn't charge very much for them. So then media companies created more inventory, which was easier because we spent more time on the internet. So we got to a point where the inventory tended to infinity, so the cost tended to zero. And then there was even less point in making quality content. So then we started doing absolutely terrible things like programmatic, which again made the inventory go down to zero again. And then we made ads automated. So most Google ads today are not even created by a human being. So then they didn't work. And we've created this entire vicious circle of decline where it's as if no one cares about anything that happens on the internet in the advertising environment. So we've entered this complete ecosystem of crap, like crap in every single way, whether it's fraud, whether it's programmatic, whether it's bots, whether it's buying traffic, whether it's arbitrage. Everything is murky and shitty. And what we really need to do is realize that actually the internet is not a bad place. If I'm watching YouTube on a 70-inch LCD TV, it's a great place to advertise to me. My attention is worth a ton of money. It's worth making a great ad for that environment. It's worth realizing that if I'm on the homepage of the New York Times, it's a really great place to serve me an amazing, high-quality, well-produced ad. So we need to stop this circle of decline and make it go the other way. And to have media that's very expensive is a very good way to happen, and it's in everyone's interest, because it's in BMW's interest to make an amazing ad that I'm going to watch that they have to pay more money for.
Well, if you don't mind, if I could respond on that, I think you're right that the internet was disruptive to legacy models based on inflated CPMs for an ad impression, but it also fostered all kinds of new revenue models for companies like Netflix or Amazon. Amazon just had their second best quarter ever, and they're also now ranked as one of the top 10 ad-supported companies in the world. It was all enabled because of internet technology. What it's doing is it's creating a more diverse marketplace and new monetization models, but it is having a shitty impact on legacy models for sure.
Most Amazon ads are search ads, and they're not great ads.
Oh, well, that's okay.
It depends on how you define an ad, but you're never going to
works, it's great.
You're never going to build a brand by advertising within search results on Amazon.
So I'm always struck at MediaPost, particularly in some of our summits, where we get these new establishment brands who came out of nowhere. Last week at our email summit, of all things, there was one purple mattress, which evolved out of nowhere. We all know the story about Aura Brush. These are brands that were created by creating demand for a product that never existed before by using the internet to distribute their own content message. So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little, Tom and I should do a little point-counterpoint later.
Yeah, I think there is a bit of more of an optimistic spin to this, as I like to see it, because I wake up every morning excited about my job. So I think the traditional ad format is changing, and the value against that is changing. So I'll give you an example. For one of our clients, for John Hancock, we just, rather than doing a video and pushing it out through, DRTV or even just through online video, we created some content, video content, in partnership with Fast Company. So we wrapped around specific content pertaining to retirement community for John Hancock, and that was distributed through social, through online, through all these other mechanisms. And these formats that we were talking about, up to 4-minute videos, and we got a 60% completion rate there. So there's value to that. The fact that people are engaged with that, it's relevant, they're getting something from that. And that's kind of what I was referring to initially in regards to recognizing that we need to change the way in which we're approaching what we do, and making sure that we're giving consumers everything that they need to choose the ads that they're engaging with. So
I think what's important to that is you built like a brand-centric solution. You thought about what that brand needed and built a solution for it. Just saying, well, 6-second ads are the new norm, let's run 6-second ads and that's going to be successful. You need to build every solution based on what that brand is trying to do, what the business outcome is going to be. Is engagement actually driving better business results? I don't know that we completely know that yet. I think there's maybe they're here, I don't know, Canvas, a company that measures kind of emotional engagement, but they can't prove out that just because somebody's tweeting more about the show that makes it more likely that they're going to go buy your product. But I do really love what you're saying. You built a solution for a client, and every one of us has to do that. We have to think about what that client is, what was the best way to deliver their message, and we have to create balance. I think we're bashing TV a little bit, but TV still has tremendous ability to drive scale, and it's why Facebook and Hulu and Twitter, and I mean, Facebook gets in a world of shit with Cambridge, and they start running TV ads to apologize to everybody. There are more people on Facebook than anywhere in the world, but yet they run a TV ad to say, we're sorry, and we're going to reunite you. So I just think that there's a lot of value in what's the message you're trying to get across, and TV can play a really great role in that, and then how do you balance that, and how do you create an experience around that for each individual customer?
So let's see, Facebook monetizes me to $100 a year and then uses that money to advertise to me. So,
Joe, you had asked about what we thought about a new currency, and you talked about attention, and I don't want to be painted into a box yet. around like agreeing to a new currency. I think that for now, we need to just bring it all on. Like, I want all the options to buy media in all the different ways. And, but what we do talk to clients about is like some foundational principles that we have, some core beliefs. And one of them is that you should harvest intent before generating new demand. And the reason why you should do that is because, well, why would you do it any other way, right? I mean, it's cheaper to harvest all the intent that exists in a marketplace, and you can use lots of signals to identify what kind of intent already exists. And then as you start to run out, you start creating new demand. And what we found is that a lot of different, because we use a lot of attribution models, that we can connect what's happening upper funnel and lower funnel, so we know when we need to turn the levers. And, you know, like it's already been said, different currencies do different things, and I do not want those options to be reduced at this point.
So true.
Yeah, I love the Media Kitchen signals planning approach to media. It's why we picked them as one of our agencies of the year this year. I think we have time for some questions from the audience before we wrap up. I know Tom has to get to a book signing soon, I think.
Wait, you were supposed to plug that, weren't you?
I did. Digital Darwinism, Amazon.com.
There you go. No, that's a plug.
Oh, wait. What did that bring? Was created by the internet. Okay, sorry. Any questions?
I wasn't saying the internet was a bad thing. I was saying that the way we've used it has been inappropriate and not very helpful for people.
Just on that last subject, if you kind of want to see the full menu of options for currencies and measurements of success, how can we move towards standardization of success and measurement if you want to kind of see all the options at the same time?
We already have moved towards standardization of success. It's called sales. So we move from we're moving towards outcomes. So all I care about are the outcomes.
But the success of a campaign, like between
It will,
Nielsen and
should
Comscore
be
and all these data
connected to
companies.
should be connected to sales. Everything needs to drive to sales.
But if there's no direct attribution model for that, you know, how can we come up with one currency from a data company that?
Why isn't there a direct attribution model for it? We use lots of attribution models. In fact,
do you have a direct closed loop attribution model for it?
We're a big customer of Visual IQ, which is one attribution partner. We have a predisposition towards measurable media. So because there's so much media out there, why wouldn't I invest in media that is measurable versus media that's not? So
because stuff that's not measurable might be better.
Yeah, like connected TV, for instance.
But if I can get good enough stuff that is measurable, why wouldn't I use measurable media?
This whole industry is a wonderful industry, and the degree to which it's going downwards is in large part with this obsession with the fact that unless it can be measured precisely, cheaply, and quickly, it's a waste of time. And that's really damaging, because it means everything's about performance funnels and retargeting, and it's never about awareness and building new brands.
So we do a lot of wonderful content programs that we can measure how those programs, and they delight customers and they make you cry. We understand how that drives lower funnel success. So that's a great example of measurable investments.
I agree with you. I think attribution is definitely needed. I think when you're looking more for leading indicators instead of lagging indicators, because you are going to, in many cases, clients need to know what's happening and how we, dial the levers up or down as their media is running. That's where I think we all want a consistent metric and a consistent currency across at least video, and we absolutely need to be moving in that direction.
I'd say there's this need to give like a single answer to questions. Like at the end of the day, brands have completely different challenges to each other. Even within different category, even within the same category, people have different challenges, and we actually need a really rich texture to measuring success. So this need to sort of standardize, to some extent, makes sense if you're standardizing the same sorts of measurement. But actually, we need to have a whole wide variety. Because sometimes it's sales, sometimes it's awareness, sometimes it's likability, sometimes it's net promoter score. Sometimes it's shareability, sometimes it's enjoyment, sometimes it's attention, sometimes it's click-through rate. We actually need like a whole series of sensors that allow us to build up a really rich fingerprint of how something's performing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good debate and a great question. Thank you for asking, because I think the typical agency response to all this is, yeah, we have separate goals, separate clients, separate KPIs, all this. We need to measure things differently, and we do. And I think we're doing that today. very effectively, and there's a whole menu of options. I think there's going to be more options, but there is this incredible sense and need for standardization within that as well, and for clients across the board, advertisers, agencies, all of us in the business to understand and measure things going into campaigns in a standardized way. So I think that's needed as well. So I think the answer is really both.
Hey guys, Ray Erickson with Epsilon Conversant. We've talked a lot about Nielsen, and that for decades we've been transacting on them and relying on their viewership. Can you guys share your POV on ACR, on set-top box data, and the like for looking at that type of data for targeting and measurement?
Yeah, I mean, Nielsen has an ACR play, but there's many different ways to measure an audience, but we still agree to do business based on a sample-based currency. So the question is, how much is that changing? You have suppliers like NBCU and Fox and Turner, obviously, offering new solutions. You have your own proprietary models. Will the Nielsen GRP continue to be the core coin of the realm for the foreseeable future?
And I'm looking to ask more of some of the sponsors, right?
Yeah. Samba. Yeah, the set-top data. There's a lot of solutions.
Well, I think obviously as an industry, we've relied too much on Nielsen for a long time, and that's part of the problem. And I think today that's changing, and we're not relying as much on it as we've all talked about and debated in the last conversation. So I think as a result of that, Nielsen is actually moving faster than they ever have before, which many of us think is still not fast enough. But they're implementing things like this ACR technology and other things. So I think that is forcing them, and it's improving as well. So I think though that we're going to have a world where multiple options exist. But if Nielsen can end up being, like we talked about, that standardized source of measurement now that they're moving faster, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, if I could say, I think it's about simplicity. You know, as the world gets more and more complex, there's a regression to the mean. People gravitate to the simple, knowable thing. But there's more diversity of inputs and outputs now than ever before. And this thing that the MRC is working on with 3MS, when the final product gets released at the end of the year, it will actually enable any buyer and seller to agree to do business on any currency that they agree upon pre and post. And what's going to happen in between is that the method or the process that's used will be consistent against all media. And it'll be duration weighted, and it will be audience based. We'll
yeah,
talk
that's an
about
important point, what these other organizations are doing, the MRC, the SIM organization, I think certainly are all great steps forward. And I think regarding NBC and the C flight, I think, you know, that's an important step forward in bringing that into the conversation. Is it perfect? No. But I think that has created a conversation among agency groups and among, you know, the sellers and the networks about how we can do this better and how we need to equalize measurement across platforms. And we kind of tend to think that digital, or from the beginning, I know we're all rethinking that, and the way we measure that is the problem, but actually I think we need to change the way television is measured when we look at the average commercial rating, and do we need to get down to the exact minute or even less when we measure those impressions. So I think matching these things up is important, and it started that conversation.
Do we have one last question here? If not, I have one I want to wrap up on, which is, you know, one of the things that shocked me when I first started covering the Upfront was I met with Jake Keever, who, God rest his soul, who was the head of sales for ABC in 1983. And he explained how the Upfront worked for me. He said, first, the agencies register their budgets. And then I said, well, stop there. They tell you how much money they have to spend and what their demand is. And he said, yes. And then he proceeded to explain why it was an allocation market. So I'm shocked to find in my prep calls, I asked Mike and others here, if you still register budgets, and the answer is yes. So the wrap-up question really quickly is, why, and will we still be doing that 5 years from now? Why would you tell your suppliers how much you demand them?
Well, this is kind of interesting because it seems like an odd model that, you know, every year we come to the table and basically it seems like, and it's not this way, we hand over a big bag of money and say, you know, now what do we pay, right, essentially, right? So I don't think that's exactly what's going on, but certainly that's the way people can paint it. It's definitely not what's going on. But I think, when you're selling anything, it's hard to break out of that model, right? So if you're going to, lock up a long-term customer or a repeat customer and not understand how much they're going to spend over that long term at all, then how do you determine what to charge them? So I think that's the thing. So I think moving towards more flexible models within that, where I understand like what the potential spend is, and then what that can decrease to, is sort of like the model that we're moving towards slowly, as we have all of these different options out there. And certainly advertisers need more flexibility than ever with all of the choices that we have out there and all of these customized media plans that we need to create with attribution included and closed loop measurement and all of these things. So it's going to get harder and harder to have a firm annual spend and do those time frames change. And so I think all of that is going to evolve.
I mean, as an agency, we've always registered a bid. It's not a binding agreement, and it's not, we're actually not handing over a bag of money up front. So it's been part of the DNA and part of the culture of the ad world. I don't think it's going to go away necessarily, but it will change in regards to what we're bidding for. And yeah.
Well, in conclusion, if Rishad is right, I would register budgets for 5-year forward deals and lock them up right now. So we'll come back next year. Next year, I will go back and look at the first year we did the 5-year outlook and see how accurate the panel was. So thank you all. Good luck on the Upfront.